trigger of your gun. When the law breaks in, how you gonna go? Shut down on the pavement or waiting on that row?
I'm Mick Dumke. A couple seats over from me is Ben Joravsky.
That's correct.
That's right. That's the guy. We both write about politics for the Chicago Reader, and we are here on the first Tuesday of every month to talk politics, education, criminal justice, and then some more politics. So appropriately enough, the show is called First Tuesdays. Really adds up. Before we introduce our guests and get right into it, Ben, I did have to say, I noticed on the way over here that Governor Rauner has started making cuts because the career politicians in Springfield aren't reforming the state to his liking quite yet. But you'll be thrilled to know that among the things that he has cut are the EDGE grants.
Oh, okay. Yeah, how many did he cut of those?
Zero? Explain what the EDGE grants are.
Well, those are the one thing that he kept from the Quinn days, right? Was the money that went to businesses. Is that what you're talking about?
That's right. Yeah.
That was the one thing that he kept over from the Quinn days was money for businesses and also tax credits for businesses as well, $100 million worth.
And these are all, of course, needy businesses that need every dollar, right?
Yeah, every nickel.
But they'll leave town.
Exactly.
So no, Rauner. By the way, probably next month, not to get ahead of this show, we'll be discussing at length what's going on in Springfield, Rauner, and Madigan, and we put out a plea to Speaker Madigan to show up here. I doubt
That's right. We think he'll take a break in his schedule and come here.
Just so you know, we put the word out, and Karen has promised to help us bring the speaker to the Hideout, right, Karen?
I can't even do that with a straight face.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So,
well, let's get right to it. We've got a couple of great guests up here joining us, and we wanted to talk about schools, education policy, and education politics because, of course, there's nothing going on right now.
That's correct.
So, sitting immediately to what is this? To my left, I guess, as you guys are. I still have to look at my hand to see which one is shaped like an L to remember. Is Blaine Elementary School Principal Troy LaRaviere. Did I say that?
Right.
Something close? All right.
Nick was struggling with that.
As a guy named Dumke, I try to get it right, but, and, of course, Ben and Chicago Teachers Union President Karen Lewis.
Yeah, Karen Lewis. Now, Karen is, this is her second time as a guest on this show.
Yep. Not a rookie anymore.
Not a rookie. We broke her in, and we appreciate you very much showing up a second time. And the last time we were here, of course, was sort of the launching stages, the early stages of what some people were really hoping would be your mayoral run, but that didn't happen for various reasons. So I guess the first question as we welcome back is, how is your health? How are you feeling?
I'm doing pretty well. This is a good week. I have good ones and bad ones, but this is a good week. So, it was fortunate that it worked that way.
It's fortunate it worked that way. So, the last time I actually saw you, I don't know if you remember this, you had collected, what was it, 40,000 signatures to run for mayor?
47.
47, okay, all right.
But who's counting?
Yeah, but who's counting, right? So I presume you still have those petitions somewhere?
No, I threw them all away.
I was going to say, can we do a file again?
No, I threw them all away.
No, you threw them all away.
I did. I threw them all away.
Ben's been hoping for a do-over.
Yeah, I was
for
going
the
to
last couple months. So
I actually put that out there. Just file the petitions and run anyway. In which case you'd be sworn in as mayor right now.
I don't know, but again, I think this was a sign that said, sit down before you break something.
Okay.
And I don't even know if Chicago is really governable. I haven't decided yet. From a distance, I'm not sure.
What do you mean by that? What do you
well,
mean?
I just think the job of being mayor is almost impossible to do. And certainly impossible to do well, unless you have a whole lot of help and a whole lot of people that really want you to do well. But there's so many people throwing lobs and grenades at folks, so it's kind of hard to It's kind of hard to really put that in perspective.
Yeah.
So that's what I think. I don't know if Chicago's governable.
Is
or
that
not.
right? Well, part of the reason it was rambunctious or ungovernable in the last 4 years is because the mayor was fighting with the teachers union. Has he been a little more solicitous? Has he been a little friendlier?
Oh yeah, he called me yesterday and told me he was putting these people on the board and why.
Okay.
You know, which I think is a step in the right direction.
Yeah.
I'm still waiting for the phone call so that he asks me who I want to be on the board.
Yeah.
Then we'll see some parity here, but at the moment, you know, baby steps.
Yeah,
and
baby.
it's not a bad thing.
So what did you think of his appointees? There was 4 new appointees. Is that correct? Did I get that right? 4 new appointees? What are your thoughts about those 4 appointees?
Okay. All right, so the one dame that's really involved in the charter schools and KIPP and Broad, I wish she were not there because
Okay.
she's just going to muddle the waters.
Yeah.
It's just going to be a hot, buttery mess with her. And she might be a really lovely lady. Dominique, I don't remember her last name, I'm sorry.
Turner?
Could have been, yeah,
Yeah.
that was it, right?
That's pretty good. That came from somewhere, I don't know.
You know,
where.
the guy from, BMO Harris. Well, I guess we had to have one of those business guys on the board.
Yeah, Mr. Furman. Ben and
Yeah.
I have written about him before.
I know you
Furlong,
have Furlong.
sorry.
Yeah, Furlong.
We're gonna mess up
Everybody's
everybody's name
name.
tonight.
That's right.
It's just
You were-
keep
yeah.
messing them up.
We know that he had meetings with the. He had private meetings with the mayor early on because that's how we came
That is
across
correct.
him.
We first
Yeah.
BMO and then who are the other for 10 trivia points? Can anybody the other 2? Oh, the principal, a former principal.
Yeah, Gail Ward
Gail
from,
Ward from Peyton.
And the
Right.
president of Loyola University.
Yes.
Father Garanzini.
who was,
I couldn't pronounce his name, but
Yeah, beneficiary of a huge TIF. So
hey.
It always
I mean,
comes back to tips.
the
Like,
truth
wait,
is the
wait,
truth.
you know.
You can't help yourself,
That
man,
just
and
popped
you're
into my head.
obsessed.
I am obsessed. It's a cry for help, Karen.
Troy, let's get you into this conversation. Did you have any reaction to the change in the school board membership?
I did not. It's business as usual. The change that I wanted to see was in the mayor's office, and we didn't get that one. And as long as that occupant remains the same, the practices and policies of the people who he appoints will continue as they were and as they have been for the last 4 years.
Are you saying that a change in the faces on the school board will suddenly not? It'll continue to be a rubber stamp. Is that what you're telling us?
Not only a rubber stamp, but these people, they have an agenda too. I mean, he usually appoints people who have some self-interest in directing public education dollars toward themselves, their businesses, their families, the businesses they invest in. So it's not that they're just rubber stamps. They actually take on the behavior of the mayor. You know, he directs our tax dollars toward his business interests and the people who he support him, and they mirror that behavior. You know, Barbara Byrd Bennett is the perfect example. You know, she mirrored the behavior of the person who appointed her to that office. You know, he directs $55 million in TIF money toward a project where the major investor is one of his campaign contributors, and she directs $20 million. She says, oh, okay, this is how it works. So let me direct $20 million of public school money toward a business that I just finished working for. And they all operate that way.
And for the record, that's 2 mentions of TIFs in 10 minutes, and I don't think Ben did either.
I didn't prompt him on the $55 million TIF handout for the Marriott Hotel.
55 in TIFs, 17 million in public school funds, pre-K funds, 10 million for furniture, another 60 extra million for charters, 100 million toward debt service. It just goes on and on and on.
On purpose.
Well, okay, for a little introduction about Troy here. You might not have been expecting such outspokenness from a principal. I certainly have never met a principal who was outspoken. And most of the principals I know sort of learn to play along in the system and get ahead. But Troy first made his name for himself outside of his school community at Blaine with, I believe it was an essay in the Chicago Sun-Times. Do I have the correct newspaper? And the theme of the essay, as I recall, was that principals were being used as political props in a larger campaign by Mayor Rahm. Am I correct in my memory of that?
Yes, he is correct. And then, and there was a larger call for actions for principals to step up and act like they were in a democracy and act like they were the professionals. They were the ones who had the master's degrees in education policy and the PhDs in curriculum and instruction, and stop letting people who know nothing about what we've been trained to do run education policy and dominate the conversation without us saying a word.
Well, okay. Now, just curious, for years and years, I've interviewed principals, teachers who have said things similar to what you're saying, but never on the record for fear that there would be punishment. In fact, there was an entire Chicago Teachers Union that was much like that until Karen took over. So have you faced any retribution from the central office or from the mayor or any of his forces since you went public with your views?
None. In fact, I faced much more retribution and poor treatment before I spoke out than afterwards. They haven't touched me since I spoke out. But before I spoke out, I had a network chief in league with parents trying to come after my job. But afterwards, people left me alone.
So there really is no excuse for people not to speak out?
None.
Okay.
You know, a guy came to me and he said, once I spoke out and became active, he said, you know, you're like that dude in that scene from JFK. And I hadn't seen the movie in years.
Yeah, that's very scary.
And he says,
This guy.
Patsy.
and he says, I saw the movie like 20 years ago, and I don't even remember, but he said
You kind of know how it ends, though, don't you?
But that's actually how it began.
Yeah, all right.
He said that you have to keep, he said, I would off you, but you have too much sunshine on you. Right? And he says, you have to keep the sunshine on yourself. So you started speaking, so you can't stop. And I wouldn't have stopped anyway.
Wait,
unless.
Who told you this? He said he would off you? No, did I hear that correctly?
No, he was quoting the film.
Metaphorically.
He was
quoting the film.
It was a metaphor, not a literal thing.
He's quoting the film.
I always need a science teacher to help me get through the metaphors. Like
I didn't need him to say that, but he was talking about an operational principle that was operating, that he thought was operating in my case.
Well, in this case, we're really safe because we're under the lights, all four of us.
That's right. Before we go further, Troy, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get to this point of being principal? And, you know, we're looking for a little more than the Twitter version, but not that much more. So tell us a little bit about your background. No, seriously, how did you get into education and end up being a principal? Why is this stuff so important to you?
Oh, my God. So there are about 4 different stories that go with that question, and I'm not going to tell probably any of them. But they involve a redemption of my mother's past in this city and the ensuring that my son has a future in this city. You know, my mother was white. She was from the north side. When she got pregnant with my oldest brother, Michael, about 55 years ago, her mother told her she had to leave. You cannot bring a black child in this neighborhood. And so she left. She moved to the south side, the only white person in communities that were 100% black, except for her. And we grew up in extreme poverty. She had no college, no high school. So we weren't on that sort of track. And when I graduated from Dunbar High School, we got a Dunbar man in here?
Right there.
That's my husband.
Coach.
So when I graduated from Dunbar, I wasn't going to college. I was going to, I joined the Navy because college wasn't for me. There was no way I was going to succeed in college. I had a girlfriend who went to Whitney Young, who went to the University of Illinois. After I left the Navy, I'm trying to make this quick. After I left the Navy, she forced me to apply to colleges. She basically said, I'm not marrying anybody who doesn't have a college degree. And so I applied to the University of Illinois. I got in, and I was so petrified. And I remember she gave me this book she had been studying. It was the autobiography. She read it for a class. It was the autobiography of Malcolm X. I read the book, and it changed my life as it has changed so many lives in this country. You know, the transformation he went through. I thought, you know, I could do this. I could do this. And I'll never forget, after I read it, I went and bought 2 books. One was called They Stole It, But You Must Return It. It was about Black history and culture. And the other was called How to Get Straight A's. I read it from cover to cover and did everything it said. Long story short, first semester, straight A's. Second semester, straight A's. Third semester, straight A's. And after the third semester, I'm looking at my grade report, and I'm like, I almost didn't come here. What was it about my life that gave me such a low assessment of myself, where I almost didn't come here? And through that decision, I made the decision to become a teacher, through that question. And in my first year of teaching, I realized, because my thing was, I am not going to let any young brother like myself come through this system and like me, and not have any sense of his potential after 13 years in this system. Like, no one was gonna come through my classroom like that. So, fast forward, I do well. I become an assistant principal, and my mother gets sick. She hadn't spoken to her family in almost 35 years. That's another side story. She gets sick, she passes away. I get a call, I'm the assistant principal at Johnson Elementary School. I get a call from Blaine, and they want to interview me. I say, sure. I get on Lakeshore Drive, I get off on Irving Park, and I look up and I see Thorick Hospital, where I last saw my mom alive. And I look forward, and I know I'm gonna get this job, and this job is meant for me. Tears come out my eyes. I got to get myself together so I can actually interview with these folks. And long story short, I go through the whole interview process. We get to the thing when you're in front of, what do they call it? When you're in front of the community forum. It's packed. They announce that I've been chosen as principal, and a receiving line comes out. Like, it's 40 people deep. And they're just, welcome to the community. Oh, we love what you had to say. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And my mind is still on Irving Park Road, and what I realized when I looked ahead, and that was that 50 years, almost to the date before that, my mother had to leave this community because of the color of one of her sons. And 50 years later, another one of her sons was being welcomed back into that community and being given one of the most important responsibilities you can give a person. I knew Blaine was for me. Like, there's something predestined about this. But I didn't know why. However, I became principal at the same time Rahm Emanuel became mayor. And I quickly found out why. That's the long story short.
Way better than the Twitter version.
That's right.
Yeah, that was more like the Facebook version.
That's right. That's why we do long form still. Right there.
That was good. That was well done.
Great story.
Having said all that, as the principal, you were the principal for the first teacher strike. Am I correct?
That was my second year.
You were involved. So this is one of my favorite topics, Karen, that Troy and I have discussed in the past, but I don't know if I've ever discussed it with you. And that is the way Mayor Emanuel, in the midst of that strike, was trying to figure out how to get out of the strike or how to justify the strike, suddenly dragged the principals in, as you recall. And suddenly the strike was all about empowering principals. Do you remember that?
I do.
Yeah. And
I do.
He dragged a bunch of principals down to a school somewhere, I forget where, and they all dutifully went, except for Troy. And so he was effectively trying to use the principals to break your strike, as I saw it strategically. Feel free to disagree with me if you want.
No, I think you're right, and it didn't work because most of the principals agreed with us anyway. I mean, really, when you would talk to them individually off to the side, I mean, even I think I talked to Troy during that time. I don't remember. Did we talk during that time?
No.
It was afterwards. It was afterwards. Right. It was after the op-ed. But, I think one of the issues is that for us, we were in the don't start none, won't be none mode, right? And they started with us. So what were we supposed to do? Like Troy says, people don't respect you when you don't stand up for what's right, if you don't stand up for your morals, and if you don't stand up for your principles with the LES.
I always had trouble with that one.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying. That's why I didn't say principal.
Right, like the pal.
Yeah.
That's right.
One of them is your pal.
So I think what happened was there was this whole mood shift because they were also counting on the parents being angry with us. Parents were passing out donuts and coffee and bagels and cream cheese and all kinds of things. But parents also understood the nature of not being heard. And I think, if you look at little children, and I think that's the way we all felt we had been treated, like little children. One of the most frustrating things for little children is not being understood. And you can see it, especially the ones that can't even talk yet. But they will look at you with that, yeah. They can't even talk, but you can see the frustration behind their little eyes around not being understood and not being heard. And I think what this strike also did was it was about being heard. And it was about a lot of people amplifying that voice.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, so you mentioned, Karen, a few minutes ago that Rom at least seems to be reaching out a little bit more or making some efforts of communication. Are we still having what I call V-neck sweater Rom? Is this the Rom from the This is the Rom from the campaign who put in the V-neck sweater and told everyone he's listening? No, this is still
the look. Here's where we're going to go with that. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. It's still that guy, only slower. He slowed down a little bit. He doesn't talk as fast. And and he's a lot more civilized.
So you can hear his F-bombs much more
No,
clearly.
he has not used the F word.
Really?
I think that's a no-no with you. He's not going to use that word anywhere near you.
Yeah, I kind of think that just, he learned his lesson.
So, Troy, what's your impression? Is you dismiss the idea that the school board change is anything significant. What about the mayor himself? Do you think that he heard anything during the election? Do you think anything is going to fundamentally change from your vantage point?
So there was a shift right toward the end of the election where everybody in Chicago just became extremely stupid.
Wait, so there was a shift?
That sounds like it.
When were they not that way? Except for the people in this room.
What his team did was create the illusion that, because remember when Chewy won that first one, it was looking like he was vulnerable. It looked as if he was very vulnerable. So they had to create a reason that he was vulnerable outside of the real reason. The real reason was that people didn't like his policies. But they created this thing where it wasn't about his policies. It wasn't about the violence in the streets that he wasn't addressing. It wasn't about the dismal way he handled the budget, the billions and billions of dollars of extra debt. It was all about his personality, right? And so that's when we get to the sweater commercial. And even after the election, the conversation became about him changing his... It's as if someone was on trial for bank robbery and they managed to convince the jury that the problem wasn't that they robbed a bank, it was the fact that they didn't smile at the teller when he ordered her to give him the money.
Pretty true.
Right? That was my crime. I didn't smile at the teller when I robbed her. And we all got looped and roped into this conversation about whether Rom smiles at the teller. And he's robbing the damn bank. And no one was saying anything. The news, the reporters.
All right, well.
It all became about that.
All right, first off, not everybody went along.
Except.
Not everybody went along.
Can I ask a question, Mick? I've been wanting to know this for a long time. You all work for the Reader. Do you get paid?
Well.
Because it's a free paper.
Yeah.
How does that really work?
What we
It's
get
all
cannot
relative,
be
Karen.
called pay.
Yeah.
Okay. We get less than a teacher.
$15 an hour.
But we just started a union. Okay, we haven't been around as long as you have been.
Our contract negotiations start tomorrow, by the way. So for all of you who are favorably disposed,
but wait a minute. Now, okay.
I didn't include you two in that.
No, that's
no,
fine.
I wasn't taking it. My point was just that actually there were quite a number of people who said they wanted something different. But your fundamental point, Troy, is that the manual campaign basically said, "Hey, you didn't like this guy, but he's still more prepared for the office than the other guy. You may like the other guy. You may like Chewy more, but he's really not ready for the job."
Right.
Wasn't that was fundamentally his campaign?
That was not only was he not ready, he was incompetent, he was stupid, and we don't want him, But Rom has the golden Rolodex, and he's going to call people, and because where's Rom's plan, by the way? We haven't seen it, we haven't heard it, but if you think about it, all they kept talking about was where's Chewy's plan? How does Chewy have a plan without seeing the books? Because you can't go by what's on the internet. What's on the internet is only what they want you to see. You have to open up real books. So, how does Chewy have that access, right? He didn't. So, but again, not as aggressive. See, I think you should run for mayor, Troy.
Well, Troy?
You got 4
right,
years to make a decision.
That's right.
Wait, Karen, now.
Yeah.
We may have had this conversation. I
We
can't
probably
recall.
did.
We did. So, do you think that realistically, practically anything has changed in terms of Rom's worldview about what he wants to do with power? Do you think, for instance, in terms of, okay, well, the guy just, well, speaking for Karen, some guy out there. Or has he just, as Mick puts it, put on the nice sweater?
Well, I think that's a really complicated question. I think it's too easy to just say no, okay? I think what the issues become is what are his agendas? What does he want to accomplish? And when you start breaking that down and figuring that out, then the question isn't whether his policies have changed. A lot of it is whether his ways of getting what he wants matters. Because I think, like, for example, this whole dance between him and this sociopathic governor, he is a sociopath. How do you hold autistic kids or Sister Mary Nice Lady, hold them like this in a chokehold and basically put a gun to their heads and said, if you don't do what I say, I'm going to shoot and it's going to be your fault? Yeah. That's a sociopath. I'm sorry. You don't use little baby children like that. So it depends on what his real relationship with the sociopathic governor is.
So do you think that he's sort of looks more liberal only because he's standing in relation to Governor Rauner, but that he's basically exactly the same on his major worldview?
I don't see people's worldview changing that radically. Has yours? I'm serious. Has your worldview changed?
Well, I actually... I don't think so. Thanks for asking. But I actually think I'll weigh in. I think that Rom is sort of policy neutral. I think he's fundamentally a power player, and the policies come and go depending on his political needs at the time. And so I guess my question is, did the election, him being forced into a runoff, which, knowing Rahm, that was definitely humiliating for Rahm.
It was. It chastened him a little bit.
Yeah.
It might have chastened him. But again, we don't know what his next plans are.
Right.
And again, if you fail at being the mayor of Chicago, that kind of limits your ability to move forward, I think. Maybe
So
I'm
you
wrong.
still think that he's plotting some other step besides mayor of Chicago? Is that what you're getting at, Karen? Is he angling for something after
You know
this
what?
job?
Please don't get me in the mind of that. I don't. I mean, you know what? I have to conserve my psychic energy.
You don't want to go there, huh?
No, I
It's
really
like that
don't
movie
want
about
to go
John
there.
Malkovich going into his brain and stuff. You don't want
Well,
Being
let's
John
talk some
Malkovich.
specifics. We got done a few minutes ago talking about the last strike, and you have not obviously taken the option of a strike off the table. I understand that's a negotiating tactic, but the mayor came back and basically said he wanted teachers to take a pay cut. Correct? So what's going to happen here going forward with the teachers' contract?
Well, I think it depends on Springfield, and I think that's what they were waiting for, something to happen in Springfield. However, there are going to be some dates that we have to look at. The first big date is coming up June 26th, when CPS has to make that pension payment. So we're going to see whether they're going to make it or not.
How much is this one?
This one's 680 something, or it was 712. I don't know how it dropped down to 680 something, but they do voodoo economics.
And we're talking millions here, of course.
Right.
This
Right.
particular payment.
This particular payment is like 678 million. So I think June 26th is going to be real, because then they're saying we don't have any money, we're broke. So once you start saying we don't have any money, then you are trying to pit my mother and her little girlfriends who are retired against the people that are working every day. Because then they're going to come back and say to Troy, you have to lay off 30% of your staff. So then your class sizes are now going up to 37, 39, 40. I mean, there's actual calculations out to the fact that they could put 51 children in a class. That's how insane this is. When one guy, Mr. Ken Griffin, Citadel, I'm calling him out, yes I do.
The wealthiest man in
I get,
Illinois.
the wealthiest man in Illinois, who could write a check and this would all be over for the entire state, based on just the amount of taxes he saved when the tax rate went back from 5%. Okay? Seriously, this one guy, if he had paid his taxes. So I'm trying to figure out, why are they trying to take the money out of my mother's pension and her little AKA mafia girlfriends?
AKA Mob. That's a notorious.
Troy, what's your take on this? Are CPS's fiscal challenges? I mean, we know they're real, but are they being sort of overstated or hyped up or emphasized so that the district can plead poverty?
Yes, they're hyped up. But they're hyped up in connection with the previous question about whether their policy frame of mind is changing. No, it is not changing. The mayor and his allies have followed one pattern, and one pattern only, since he was elected 4 years ago. It's very simple. It's to create a parasitic relationship, a series of parasitic relationships between his supporters and your tax dollars. And when they can't when there are no tax dollars to create a parasitic relationship to, they create a parasitic relationship between his supporters and your future tax dollars by using the city's borrowing power. It is that simple. You can look at schools in terms of the parasitic relationship they've set up between charter schools and your tax dollars, Aramark, the custodial firm that's messing up our schools, Sodexo Magic and your tax dollars. We can look at transportation in terms of the parking meters. We can look at venture cards. And then you have the Board of Education creating a parasitic relationship with our future tax dollars with this $100 million that we are going to owe that we did not have to owe. 17 million. This is one of the most ridiculous.
All right, so hold on one second.
We start getting those
this is a
numbers
great
going.
list. This is a great
No,
list.
I need
But
to do this
What do
one.
what do you mean by parasitic relationship? Be specific here.
So this is one example. So he borrowed 17 million supposedly to pay for the expansion of pre-K. And he's going to pay 34 million back to those who gave the city the loan. Now,
who happens to be
those
Goldman Sachs?
Goldman
right?
Sachs, Northern Trust, and Pritzker, who all are 3 of his 60th largest campaign contributors. And he says that, but they're only going to get the extra $17 million if the kids in pre-K outdo the kids who don't get pre-K. Of course, the kids who get pre-K are going to outdo the kids who don't. I mean, who pays double when something works? It's like me having a plumber, and he's saying, well, how much is it going to cost? $2,500. I'll give you $5,000 if it doesn't leak. Who is that irresponsible with their own money? Nobody, but he'll be that irresponsible with your tax dollars or your borrowing power. That is the example of the parasitic, because when you have a parasitic relationship, because I'm not against business, right? There are good, mutually beneficial business relationships between businesses, private businesses, and the city. The people who built the schools, they were private business. We got something out of it. They got paid, we got a school. But when you have parasitic relationships, you have money going toward people, and then there's actually harm being done to the system or to the public entity that's spending the money. And there's harm being done by Aramark. There's harm being done by Northern Trust and Goldman Sachs. There's harm being done by Sodexo. There's harm being done by the parking meter companies. That is a parasitic relationship. And getting back to the question, that has been at the root of his policy from the day he thought about becoming mayor, and it will never not be a part of his policy.
Okay.
And it's part of, I would also say, it's in defense of Rahm, and I know, that's not a popular thing to say in this room, but it's not really a defense of Rahm. It's more of a condemnation of the rest of the Democratic Party and the other party as well. But this is sort of like a traveling roadshow where these investment groups are going around the country pitching these various ideas. A few years ago, of course, it was like, you're in desperate financial straits. We want you to sell your hard assets, the parking meter system, the Skyway, the downtown parking garages, all of which are costing us much more money, of course, than we thought. And then it's become these more abstract things. So a couple years ago, I was in New York City at a conference where I think it was Goldman Sachs, a representative was there talking about a similar thing, what you're talking about pre-K, Troy, except it was with the jail population. So if they could get the jail population to go down, then Goldman Sachs essentially made money off it. So, hey, they're selling it, this is a great outcome. We want the jail population to go down. Well, the jail population actually has been going down for like 25 years without Goldman Sachs. Which is a good thing, but then they got in the deal. So anyway, that's just a quick aside to say that it's part of the sophistication, I guess you could say, that Rahm Emanuel brings from his experience in the as an investment banker and working in Washington.
Well, but to get a little more specific, following up on what Karen said, so presuming that this budget crisis is exaggerated at best, with some real. Have they started putting the squeeze on the principals yet? In other words, I did this a couple years ago where they were saying, we would like to give you more money, but there's these geezer teachers that are stealing all the money. We got to pay them the pensions. So have they started that yet? Have they given you any budget numbers that say, we're cutting your budget 20% or X percent because we got to take care of Karen's mom?
They're setting us up for that. Right, the same way they were setting the public up and teachers up when they proposed that 7% pay reduction. We actually got a letter from Jesse Ruiz that said, and I've never seen anything like this in my life. Basically, we're not going to give you a budget. And we're not going to give you one because we have no idea what finances are going to be available. And we have to wait on the state, Springfield, before we can even offer a budget. as an aside, inaction in Springfield is no excuse for inaction in Chicago. But what they're doing, what I see happening, is that they are disarming us. So if you remember the last budget cut in 2013, right, we got our budgets and parents across the city raised hell, right? And it is my belief that we're not going to see a budget until school is out, parents are off on vacation, so that they can put forth their austerity without the kind of pushback that they got 2 years ago. That's what I believe is going to happen. So in terms of communication between us and the board, they're being strategic about how they're going to introduce austerity into the school system.
So presuming that those are cuts in August, that means you would have about 2 weeks to get your school together? It means what, firing teachers, rearranging classrooms, that kind of thing? You're going to condense the entire summer into about 2 weeks of hectic activity?
I don't think it's going to be August, but we will have a reduced time period. I think it's going to be right after, a couple weeks after school ends, probably. That's my belief, but it's just a guess.
I have another question. I'd like to ask a question. I'm sorry, since I'm supposed to be a panelist, but I think we ought to start thinking about what does that look like for us, you know? And how do we fight back, and how do we say no to this and say yes to something else? Part of our contract actually says that CPS and CTU will work together to make legislative proposals. My question is, will they make legislative proposals for progressive revenue? That's what I want to know. Will they make legislative proposals for revenue? Or all the legislative proposals? I mean, I think the other thing that happened to them, they were waiting on Springfield and they were waiting on the Supreme Court to give them some police powers or something. And the Supreme Court said, no. And set it 7-1. 7-0. Whereas with Conover, there was 6-1. There was a little leeway with one of the justices thought, well, maybe. But those two things have to be dealt with structurally, and they can't do it by themselves. Now, why they continue to have Willie Sutton in charge of, and continuing to use these banksters in charge of how to spend money. Like you said, they're spending our tax dollars, and then they're going to look at you guys and say, well, we got to really increase your taxes, so you'll be mad with us. But I said, did you forget that we also have to live in the city of Chicago? We're increasing our own taxes for a pay cut? I don't think so. So, I think part of the problem is that we have to have serious conversations about revenue now. And that is what we have to talk about. And if we're talking about anything else, then we're not going anywhere.
Are you talking about it at the city level, not just at Spring? Because basically the mayor right now is saying, which to your earlier point, Troy, he wasn't very specific during the election. I think, Karen, we all mentioned this. He wasn't specific during the election. He's still not being specific. He's saying we need help from Springfield. So are you saying at the city level that Rahm needs to pursue revenue choices? If not, what is Rahm supposed to do, given the fact that, as you put it, there's a sociopath running things in Springfield?
I didn't make that up. He really is. My best friend is a psychiatrist, and she told me. Because I asked her, I said, is he a sociopath, a psychopath? What kind of pathology does this man have? And she told me he's a sociopath.
That's good enough for me.
So as far as I'm concerned, if a psychiatrist says that man's a sociopath, plus look at all that crazy in his eye.
So what is Rahm supposed to do? I mean,
he's supposed to ask for revenue. That's
from
what he's supposed to. Yeah, he's supposed to talk to Madigan and talk to Cullerton, since they're on the same party line. He needs to talk to them about, pushing forth revenue bills. He needs to do that.
You don't think he has already?
No, not what he needs to do. No, I don't think so. because we saw nothing coming out of Springfield about real revenue other than his casino.
You know, Karen, when you have these discussions with Rom,
Discussions.
Well,
but
conversations, whatever they are, dialogues.
We're still waiting for our calls back.
Yeah,
so
yeah,
we
no.
want to know what he's like.
Do you ever address this fundamental point where at some point he has to offer you a proposal that you can, with some credibility, take to your members? And he's not done that at all. So when you have these conversations with him, does that ever, just even emerge like, Rom, I love you dearly, but come on, you got to give me a little something here. Does it ever get to that point, or is it just more superficial?
No, it's he has his little agenda points that he wants to talk to me about. Excuse me, and that's what we talk about, and then it's like, okay, bye. But I like it's Karen. This is the mayor. Okay. So.
Do you have his cell phone number
I
programmed
have
into your
both
phone?
his cell phone numbers.
So does it come up Rom? How do you have it entered into your cell phone?
It says Rom's cell, and then it says Rom's cell too, because he texted me, and he said when I was ill, he texted me, reached out, and he said, "I'm sorry to hear, hope you're feeling better, blah blah blah." Rom. So I ignored it because it wasn't the number that I had before. And then something else happened, and he texted me again. So I wrote back, "Who is this really?"
He says, "It's me."
And he said, "It's me, the mayor. And if you don't believe me, I'm sitting at my desk right now." And he gave me the phone number to his desk. So I have 3 phone numbers for Ron.
Does he answer when you call, or
I've
do you
never
text
called.
him?
I've never.
Troy, does the mayor call you?
He does not.
Okay.
But I would like to make a quick comment on the revenue. No,
Yeah.
he's not going to propose the revenue. He's not going to propose it unless the residents of Chicago force them to propose it. People like us have to begin to build relationships. I have to build relationships with my parents and help them understand what's coming, help them to remember that the last time they pushed austerity, right afterwards they did that $20 million contract that's now under federal investigation. Right after austerity, they spent $10 million on furniture. Right after austerity, they spent $300. I have to remind them of that. Not only do I have to remind them of that, but I have to educate them on what the revenue options are and try to encourage them to call their elected representatives, encourage them to call the mayor to push those options, push those revenue options, because the mayor certainly won't do it on his own.
Okay, then let me, since you raised the parents, and I'm trying to get you to pick on the parents at Blaine School, and I'm not blaming the parents at Blaine School for the last election, but the fact remains that the north side of Chicago, particularly like the 44th Ward, the 43rd Ward, the 42nd Ward, voted overwhelmingly for Rahm. And it really only took Senator Mark Kirk to mention the word Detroit, and they were just in a total panic, okay? So
I think it was going that way before.
it was going
Senator
that, but that
Kirk
just
spoke
sealed
up.
the
But
deal. 80% of the vote, I believe, in the 43rd Ward.
And you're referring to Senator Kirk warning that Chicago could go the way of Detroit.
Chicago would go the way of Detroit unless we had a man with vision like Mayor Rahm running the show, even though he was the mayor for the 4 years leading up to this. So my question is, it seems as though the public is not, this hurts me to say this because I've only been fighting for this stuff for 30,000 years, it's just not aboard. I mean, they seem more susceptible to Rahm's agenda. He just won with 58% of the vote. So how do you deal with that? How do you rectify? Rahm is sitting there. I won. I'm not. It looks like he's trying to force a strike with the teachers here. So how do you deal with the fact that you're trying to educate your parents that if they don't stand up and fight, they're going to face cuts, and yet they voted for this austerity plan?
2 responses to that. I think it was in the Tribune where they did a poll. And although folks in that community voted heavily in favor of Emmanuel, people who had school children in those communities, when you divided it that way, there was a strong shift toward Truett. And so people who understood and had experience with the policies and the ramifications of those policies tended to vote a little smarter. The other thing is that he won versus someone who, I mean, this man had a propaganda machine in play for 4 years. He won against a campaign that had just gotten rolling about a month before the first vote and hadn't really gotten rolling yet. What would happen if we decided we were going to start today to educate the populace of Chicago? We were going to start today to do the kind of voter outreach and registration that we need to win the next election. I think we have more than a fighting chance.
Before we go to the audience questions, I have to ask you about this. Karen, again, I alluded to this earlier, but obviously the notion of a strike is on the table. Wouldn't that backfire against you and your members? I certainly don't think the mayor wants a strike. We know that. Wouldn't that also be problematic politically or in the public eye for you and your members?
Again, it depends on what paradigm you're talking about. We didn't go out on strike last time just, let's go out on strike. No, we had plans. We talked to parents. We talked to community members. We had those educational meetings. We're going through that stuff now. We're letting the community know what's coming down the pike, Mick. And that is how you get people on your side. You just don't show up one day, take a vote, and say, okay, we're going out on strike. You know, you have to prepare for a strike. And we certainly prepared for the last one, and we will prepare for this one if it comes to that.
And so people are supportive of where you are? That's the feedback you're getting?
Yes, because people don't want 51 children in a classroom. Again, when you're talking to parents, they don't want to have to scramble around and look for daycare or something of that nature. No, they don't want to do that. But the key is their public relations attacking us last time backfired. So they haven't attacked us. Rom hasn't called us greedy teachers. He's had a couple of his trolls on your site and the Tribune site, well, including the whole Tribune editorial board. One big giant troll.
The Tribune editorial board is a troll for Rom. I hadn't thought about it that way, but when you put it that way.
I mean, it just sort of makes sense. You have to be logical about that. But no, I don't think so. And I don't think we would go out on strike if we didn't have the support.
And I'm the devil's advocate guy up here, so I'm
you
keep asking this
are.
question. Yeah, people aren't saying to you, well, why should you guys get a pay raise? The rest of us in out here, we're having a hard time getting pay raises. The school system is broke. Why should we come up with more money? We can hardly pay the indebtedness we have. Why should we come up with more money for a pay raise for your members?
Yeah, I know people say that all the time, but the circumstances around that are people in the private sector have been getting steady pay raises over a period of time, and nobody in the booming 90s was upset when teachers were only getting 1% and 2% raises. Nobody in the 90s said, that's what you deserve, or, you should have some more. I mean, so I think the problem is there's this, what we do have is some pension envy. We have a little bit of that. And because people work for places that steal their money. Like, again, this sociopath wants to take all the money out of a defined benefit program and put it in a 401k, risky as heck, tied to the stock market, which we don't really control. So I understand what you're saying, Mick. However, the key is this: come do our work. Since everybody thinks they can do what we do, come do our work. Come do our work. Come do our work. Come work these insane hours now that we're working the longest school day on the planet, and come do it without resources. Come do it without support, and come do it, with, not saying Troy, crazy principles.
Crazy principles.
It sounds like a newsroom that we work in, by the way. But yeah.
Minus the crazy principles. Let's get some questions in. And that can was the first one up, so make it a good one.
No pressure.
Aramark, it's been referenced. I don't understand why that contract is still continuing. I'm trying to understand it.
Okay.
First of all, Ben, will you explain what this is? We've referenced Aramark.
Okay.
Ben just wrote a column about this for this week.
Okay, but just so everybody heard the question. The question was, why does the school board and the mayor, in their infinite wisdom, continue this privatization deal they have with a cleaning service called Aramark to allegedly clean the schools of Chicago when the schools... Okay, well, that's why I used the word allegedly. Anyway, this seems to be this guy's favorite topic. We've had this conversation many times. And yes, I did just write a column about it, but I'll let you all read that column. It should be out tomorrow. But tell us about it, Troy.
So here's some background I've never seen in the public, in the media. When Tim Cawley, appointed by the mayor, he's an Emmanuel appointee at CPS. He doesn't even live in Chicago, and they gave him a waiver on the residency requirement just to put him in the position to do what he did. And it is intentional. Remember, create parasitic relationships. So one of his first moves, normally it's principal, engineer, janitors. That was the chain of command. So one of his first moves, and no one understood why, was to remove the engineer from under the authority of the principal. And so now the principal is supervising the custodians. And they said they would get a head custodian, and that one would do most of the supervision. But the principal is now supervising custodians. Made no sense whatsoever. So a few months later, he comes up with a brilliant idea. We'll hire a private custodial management agency so that way they can come in and manage them for you and relieve you of the burden, thereby solving the problem that I purposely created.
By the way, Tim Cawley looks exactly like Montgomery Burns.
So it is intentional. Why is the contract still in play? Because parents, teachers, and students, although we've made some noise, we haven't made enough noise yet.
And it was punishment to SEIU Local 1 and Local 73.
But
Cawley.
Mr. Burns? So the question again is, still there's an uproar and nothing's happened about this. And just the issue here is that not only has the custodial services been outsourced, but the job isn't being done, right? That the classrooms and schools are not clean. So, yeah. So there's a contract that's been put out. Someone's making money off this, Magic Johnson. As I told Ben, we were working on this column this week, I said, it's really too bad. I loved his post-up move all those years, but he's one of the investors in one of the companies that's part of this deal. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, no one cares, but it's just sort of sums things up. I'll go into one of my pessimistic moods here, which I've been telling Karen I'm really working on being more optimistic and cheery. But when you put it that way,
it's
no
not
one.
Working.
Yes. I don't know. You know. Yeah. You point out that the schools are filthy. You're spending probably as much, if not more, because Lord knows how much we're really spending on the deal. Now, I will say that the teachers union filed a grievance. Erica Wozniak is standing over there. They lost the first round of that grievance. But I presume, not to tell the teachers union how to do their business, that they will appeal. And okay, and so maybe it's so bizarre to think that you have to solve this critical problem that was brought on by bad management through a union grievance process. I think that's that's Fred Klonsky, union activist out there. Grumbling as always, but anyway,
Next
that
question,
man right
yeah.
there.
What are the odds of
What are the odds of Emanuel getting recalled?
I don't think we have recall
I don't think so
legislation in
either.
Illinois.
No,
No.
can't happen. You're stuck with him.
You're stuck with him. And
Zero.
You're not
You can
California.
hope perhaps that
Zero.
the next President Clinton taps him for a cabinet post or something, if you dare.
Yes, sir.
Governor Rauner seems to be setting himself up to do a Reagan traffic controllers firing.
Yeah.
I mean, he's setting up
AFSCME.
AFSCME with the state workers, the prison workers. He's not really negotiating. He's trying to provoke a strike. And my real question is, where is Rahm gonna stand if this kind of stuff
Okay.
actually starts?
The question is, the presumption is that Rauner's setting up a situation like Reagan did with the air traffic controllers in 1981 or whatever, and force a confrontation with the union so he could fire a bunch of unions and then hire non-union workers. And then so the ultimate question is, and this is for Karen, what will Mayor Rahm do if Rauner goes that route?
You know, I don't know, because every union is different, okay? You have to understand, every union has a different worldview about how they relate with their members and how their members relate to the public. I mean, and one of the things you said about AFSCME, for example, they don't have a lot of, smiling faces. You got, security guards and COs in prisons in downstate Illinois. So how do you make them sympathetic, And AFSCME is considering, and I don't know if that, because I don't know, is there anybody here who was down in Springfield, but they had some legislation that would send them to binding arbitration instead of, striking. So I don't know. I mean, again, every union is different, so we can't say. And how Rahm or Rauner will do, I don't think Rahm really wants to have the unions mad with him if he's going to get a cabinet post with the next president. So I don't know. I mean, it's a really interesting thing to speculate about, but.
Yeah, I will say that when Rauner spoke to the city council a few weeks ago, which was a bizarre thing to witness, by the way, the speech really said nothing except that there's no bailout for Chicago. And I've got a whole lot of other things to deal with besides you guys. That was the gist of it. But, it was a not so veiled appeal to the city council to say, hey, let me impose right-to-work laws, which is anti-union laws, in a piecemeal fashion across the state, if not for Chicago and the entire state of Illinois. And so he's making that pitch, and Rahm came out. This was a great thing for Rahm. To have Rauner in the city council talking some anti-union stuff was a great thing for Rahm, because he came right out, and he was able to sort of beat his chest and say, we would never do that here. I'll never support that. I've always been a union guy. So I actually think that Rauner is politically a great thing for Rahm, because it helps remind people that he's not Rauner. Rahm is not Rauner, and maybe you can't say much about Rahm, but at least you can say that.
That young lady right there.
The WBEZ, when you're talking about the election results, WBEZ and the Sun Times reported that the African American community voted overwhelmingly for Rahm to use that power.
So the question is, the African American wards, I believe all of them voted for Mayor Emanuel, despite so many of the things that he did impacting those communities disproportionately: school closings, violence, which we can't all put on Rahm. But a lot of the issues impact those communities, but they voted for Rahm anyway. So why, and does that actually mean that Rahm is going to have to deliver something to those areas now?
Well, I want to say, let us get real about the fact that we live in Chicago, and we live in racially isolated parts of the city. Black people don't trust Mexicans. Mexicans don't trust black people. That's why we had this problem. People talked about it openly. It wasn't even quiet. So let us not pretend that we don't know why black people voted for Rahm. Because here was the notion that they're going to get everything, we're going to get nothing. There were Latinos that said that about when I was talking about running. She's going to give everything to the blacks, we're going to get nothing. So the problem is that we have not forged the right relationships and coalitions for 30 years. And white politicians have been able to take advantage of that. That's on us to start forging the coalitions. That was the one thing I was hoping would happen out of this election. And I think it's happened a little bit in that first round of elections when Rahm got that smackdown, when he did not walk through like he had planned to, and like he did in 2011. So we need to be very honest about the issues we have of prejudice, distrust, anger, all kinds of things, and stop pretending that they don't exist. And it's one of the reasons why our schools are so vulnerable.
Now, the second part of the question, I'd love to hear you address that, is what will the political payback for the black wards of the South and West Side be, since they so decisively, generally in politics, you give something, you get something. So 58% of the black wards voted for Mayor Rahm, something like that, 56 maybe. So what will the payback be? Will they be opening more schools?
I have no idea. I don't think they'll be opening more schools. They won't,
Giving black teachers a raise?
No, I'm pretty sure that won't happen either.
Okay.
Or rehiring all the ones they fired.
Yeah.
How about that?
So do you think that was like the dumbest political decision of the last 30 years?
I'm not in that. I'm not calling. I'm not calling that.
Okay.
I'm not calling that. They'll be all over Twitter beating me up and Facebook. No, but seriously, I think that this was a good experience for us as a city to start having these kinds of conversations out loud that we haven't had before, that we've been tipping around on eggshells around. So
you see it obviously. It wasn't a pro-Rahm vote. It was an anti-Hispanic vote, actually.
I don't know. What do you think, Troy?
If you look at the way the black vote went in the first round, it supports what you're saying. Remember, Willie Wilson got 10% of the black vote. Mm-hmm. Rahm got 45 in the first.
Willie got
second
10% of the total vote. Yeah, an even higher percentage of the black vote, right?
And so that 10%, and Rahm got 45. In the next election, he got 55. It was that 10% that did not vote for Rahm in the first election, that voted for Willie, that switched and voted for Rahm. So it wasn't as if they thought Rahm was the best choice. But when pitted against a Latino candidate, and the other option was Rahm, what Karen said came to be. And so, it unfortunately is a reality of politics in Chicago and perception in Chicago. And I've already told you my theory about what the payback is.
I must have forgotten a fog of something.
The preachers are going to get the closed schools.
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah, you did tell me that. That's right. That was a conversation that took we had an hour on that one. Mr. Reeves in the front row.
My husband said that. The system's not designed to educate black children about stuff like that. Let's get real. The system is designed to make people compliant, okay? And it's gotten worse since we've had the Common Core.
Hold on. The question was, what can we do for kids who are most risk because they're ignorant of how the world works? And the specific example he gave was he was talking to a young man about 22 years old, and this young man did not know what the CIA was. So anyway, how do you deal with a population which is, I guess, is susceptible to being manipulated because they're so ignorant and clueless?
Well, because you're not going to get taught about the CIA in nobody does. So it's not just this one kid who's struggling. You know, the middle-class white kid at Lincoln Park isn't going to get taught what the CIA is. You learn that from your parents, from your circle of knowledge that happens somewhere else. So if you think that the Chicago public schools or any schools can totally educate children, then we're in a really bad case because it wasn't designed to do that. So this is why we have to have mentors. This is why we have to have an alternative system. But it doesn't take the place of the one. But we have to start teaching anti-racist pedagogy. We have to start that. We have to start real restorative justice, not just the notion of peace circles and we're all done, you know, but this notion of how things really work is part of how we shift the real paradigm. And you're right.
I was in a conversation with a gentleman who does curriculum work, and we were talking about charter schools and public versus charters and saving the public school system. And he made this point. He said, we have to remember that in this effort to save the public school system, we're trying to save a system that we had a whole lot of problems with before we began to engage in this effort to save them. And one of them was this idea that there was not a relevant curriculum. But we've been so involved in just trying to make sure that there is at least a publicly accountable system that we've lost track and lost some of the time and energy that we used to be able to devote to questions like that.
You know, before we get another question from the audience, I have to ask you guys about charter schools. You brought it up, Troy. Right now, they're obviously, the charter schools, as I see it, have started to move into areas where they weren't before, and namely like the North Lakefront neighborhoods. So there's a debate going on about whether they can move into Uptown. Up in my neighborhood in Rogers Park, there's, I think Noble's trying to expand up there as well. So I guess my question is just your thoughts on those battles, and does this signal anything about the mayor? Is it just same policy as usual with pushing charters, or wasn't he supposed to have learned that lesson in the election too?
Oh, me? Okay. All right, so I'm so tired of the discussion about charter schools as if they're real, you know? These are the unicorn and, you know, everything is so wonderful, and, you know, we're just keeping kids in political prison. That's KIP. You know, the notion that charter schools are the answer to problems is ridiculous. Because first of all, again, people don't understand. They talk about school choice. The schools choose the kids. They're not being chosen by parents. Parents want a school in their neighborhoods that they can send their children to that are safe and going to do the job of getting their kids from point A to point B. That's what they want. So the charter schools are just another way to take money, separate the tax dollars from the people that need them the most, and be unaccountable. And they're worse and worse and worse. This is the thing. They don't get better. They get worse and worse and worse as each iteration.
Is it a deliberate strategy, Troy, to start moving them into neighborhoods like like your school?
Sure.
Of course. I mean, when you're profit-based, you have to grow. You have to expand. There are only so many poor minority income communities that you can occupy.
Destroy.
You have to expand into another. But in the charter school debate and the reform debate in general, what I've noticed is that when numbers are cited, some of the most basic principles of scientific inquiry are ignored. In any scientific endeavor, when you talk about data, you have to you always have something to control for factors that might be influencing the outcome beyond the thing you're measuring. That is a basic principle of scientific inquiry. And whenever charter schools data is discussed, that basic principle is always discarded. No one follows it. When it is followed, their data is amongst the most abysmal in the city. When you control for race, when you control for previous test score, the growth of students, the academic growth in charter schools is abysmal. The growth percentile for public schools in CPS is the 85th percentile. The growth percentile for charter schools is the 47th. When you just look at low-income communities, the growth percentile for public schools is 64. This is in reading. The growth percentile for students in charter schools is 29. And what did you expect from a system that violates every research-based principle on what creates good school system? Qualified teachers, attracting them with a decent salary. What would you expect? And so, and what I've noticed in Lakeview versus where I live on the south side, that informed parents are organizing themselves. They just stopped this Noble one, or at least got it postponed on the Urban Park Road, right? But because they're informed, and I think again, it is our responsibility, particularly principals and teachers, to begin informing parents and community members about things like the data that I just mentioned, that these are not good schools, that there is a way to look at, are we looking at schools that recruit good students, or are we looking at schools that actually do something with the students they recruit? And inform them about these things so that they can then be informed consumers and do the kind of organizing that the parents on the north side just did to ensure that Noble Charter did not appear or did not get addressed on the CPS board's agenda.
Yeah.
All right.
Young man.
This month.
First of all, I want to, as a former union organizer, I want to thank you for your service in standing up for our union brothers and sisters. My question is this. Bruce Rauner is an unabashed union buster, and he's also out to privatize education. Now,
And he may be a sociopath.
Now, in Springfield, you have some state legislators which are in arms with our union brothers and sisters, like Rob Martwick, who I work for, so obviously shameless plug, but he's with us, right? Then you have folks like Luis Arroyo, who's the king of charter schools. How do you see the layout of Springfield, particularly given the fact that Bruce Rauner has charter schools named after him?
Okay, wait, did everybody hear the question? Because he did his best. Now, everybody heard it? No need to repeat it? Karen Lewis is in the hot seat.
All right, so again, this is about building relationships with people who may or may not be your friends on some issues, but can be on others, okay? I mean, Springfield is, it's different, okay? And the problem with Springfield is you cannot say yes or no, black or white. You know, there's all of this nuance that you have to deal with that is basically, again, how do they perceive you? How do they perceive your power? Are your members calling the members of the General Assembly and raising hell with them? You know, these are the kinds of things that support the kinds of issues that come forward. So it's doable, but it takes a lot. But I will say this about Springfield. CTU has a very different face in Springfield now than it used to have. We are much more respected than we used to be. But that's also because we motivate and mobilize our membership. And when you're an organizer, if you're not organized, if you're not mobilized, then, like you said, the parents push back on Noble Street. But I also want to say, parents have been complaining for a long time about stuff, and it was stuff they didn't really want, they could do. There's a reason why Noble got pushed off of the agenda in May. It'll probably be up in June, you know. So let's not be too, you know, naive about how things work. But the one thing is the fact that it was there, and I'm going to say this again, white parents just gave them a whole bunch of cover. They gave them a whole bunch of cover to say, we don't want this. NIMBY, not in my backyard. This is not what I want for my child. So when they don't listen to black parents, nobody really says anything about it. It's just kind of sad and people are crying when their schools are closed. But they have a much bigger responsibility to the parents that elected them. So there you go.
All right, we've got time for one more.
I've noticed, maybe we've all noticed this before, but there's always seems to be money for programming. Lately, I've been told that there's programs purchased for the city of Chicago that are sitting in warehouses, and they are free to the principals if they send certain teachers to these trainings. But the materials have already been purchased, and presumably these companies are being owned by people sitting on the board already.
All right, the question is the public going to be educated as part of your respective campaigns on the way that CPS is spending money on programming and materials, some of which are just sitting in warehouses?
Well, I think it's exactly why we need an elected representative school board, and why 89% of Chicagoans that got a chance to vote on that said yes, because that's how you hold people accountable. You can't hold one person. I'm sorry, you can't. Mayoral control is a disaster. We have to wait every 4 years to get rid of somebody, and if you've got $30 million war chest, you know, you can be mayor as long as you want to be. So, you know, I think one of the problems is we continue to shy away because, frankly, you get in the weeds when you start talking about this. And it's just too much for people to believe or to take in. And I think that's one of the problems why we get so frustrated is because there's so much garbage. But then you got to go to this one and this one and this one. Troy ran down 40 different sets of numbers. How many of you are going to remember them when you walk out of here? You get the overwhelming, overarching understanding, but until we start talking about Ken Griffin alone could write a check that could solve the pension problem, could solve this, could solve that, just by paying his taxes. These are the things that we have to say over and over again, and stop trying to solve all the problems, okay? You have to pick and choose which ones people can absorb.
I'd like to make a comment about the question right before it in regard to teacher pay and things like, and that came from a comment about people supporting or not supporting teachers during the strike. We have to stop elevating minority dissenting voices that are on the side of the people who are trying to create parasitic relationships. The news media will find 50 parents who support teachers and 5 who don't, and they will take 2 of each and give them an equal voice. We have to not let that influence what we think and what we know about the kinds of support that we experience on a day-to-day basis with our parents. Just today, I was walking at the front of my school, and I ran into a parent who's an investor. This is one he's a trader, stock trader, and a stock trader, told me he'd be fine with teachers getting a raise. He'd be fine with them raising his taxes as long as he knew the tax dollars would be used responsibly, because they had tax dollars in the last 10 years and they were not spending them to pay the debts that they were supposed to be spending them to pay. So are they going to raise my tax dollars again and then waste it on something else? He said, a trader, a stock trader, said that he would be fine if he knew that there was a responsible system that would spend the funds correctly. We have to understand that the majority of people feel that way and stop letting dissenting voices who get equal time, even though they do not occupy equal intellectual space in this city, influence us.
All right. Well, we know where Troy and Karen stand, so thank you both for coming here and sharing some thoughts and
Thanks for having me.
Arguing with us and educating us and all that.
Thank you.
And
I still want to know how you get paid from a free paper.
well, we don't get paid very much, Karen.
That's
the
the key.
short answer.
That's the key.
Which is why we too are unionized and going to the negotiating table. But anyway, guys, we'll be back next month. The good news is that we don't have a state subsidy, so the Bruce Rauner can't suspend it. So we'll see you next month. Thanks for coming out.